One of the biggest burning questions of the Switch 2 is what games will launch alongside it. While details are still scarce, perhaps looking back at Nintendo's history of console releases can give us some clues. There's been some hits and some misses, but are there any patterns? Well, let's have a look and find out. Al from GamesRadar here, and welcome to Switch On, where we talk all things Nintendo Switch 2. Working our way backwards, we of course start with the original Switch. Now, being so recent, I'll keep this brief, and besides, we all remember who did the heavy lifting here. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was a monumentous launch title, revolutionizing not only the series' MO, but the capabilities of handheld gaming as a whole. Breath of the Wild was synonymous with the Switch at launch, and is often forgotten that it also acted as a swan song for the Wii U. The Switch's only other first-party titles were Snipperclips, a co-op puzzle game, and 1-2 Switch, a demonstrative collection of minigames that utilize the console's various new functionalities. And that is a sentence I'm going to be repeating a lot today. For third-party titles released in the console's first month, among others, we have Shovel Knight Treasure Trove and The Binding of Isaac, two indie heavy hitters. And towards the end of the first month, a global playtest for Splatoon 2, building hype for the next entry in Nintendo's then newest powerhouse. And now onto the Wii U, where things get a little interesting. The major first-party launch title was New Super Mario Bros. U, the fourth and final entry in the New Super Mario Bros. Series. This was flanked by Nintendo Land, a demonstrative collection of minigames that utilize the console's various new functionalities. Told you we'd hear that again. Neither first-party title pulled major success, and this time the burden fell to a pretty decent selection of third-party titles and ports of already successful games. Mass Effect 3, Assassin's Creed 3, Darksiders 2, NBA 2K13, and Batman Arkham City, all pulling in strong review scores. There was a clear effort from Nintendo to appear more adult with the Wii U, as demonstrated by the likes of Ninja Gaiden 3 coming to the console on release day, as well as Zombie U, a full-on horror launch title. Of course, nothing could be as scary as that damn piano in Super Mario 64. Sticking with home consoles for now, next up is the Wii, one of Nintendo's most successful console launches to date. Similar to its eventual successor, this console owed a lot to the Legend of Zelda series, which provided the biggest name with Twilight Princess. Interestingly enough, also just like Breath of the Wild, it launched simultaneously on the previous console, the Nintendo GameCube. We'll touch on that again later. But let's not forget the other winner here. The Wii also had the OG demonstrative collection of minigames that utilize the console's various new functionalities. Trademarked. Wii Sports was a phenomenon, the epitome of Nintendo's initiative with the Wii to appeal to the casual gamer. It was included with the console, which obviously bolstered what counted for sales, but it was a fantastic collection of bite-sized and social games that was perfect to whip out at any given occasion. It paved the way for Nintendo's console launch titles. It's just a shame none of its spiritual successors have quite lived up to the Wii Sports prestige. The Wii's release window also saw third-party releases of Madden NFL 07, Trauma Center Second Opinion, and Rayman Raving Rabbids, all performing pretty well. Now, the GameCube's release window gets a little muddy, as it didn't release worldwide simultaneously. Japan got the console in September 2001, North America in November 2001, but Europe and Australia didn't get their hands on it until May of 2002. But taking the North America launch window, we had Luigi's Mansion as the major first-party release, supported by Wave Race Blue Storm, alongside third-party belters like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, Madden NFL 2002, and Star Wars Rogue Leader Rogue Squadron 2, solidifying the GameCube as a contender in a market landscape then dominated by the PlayStation 2. It's also worth noting that in that first month, now fan favorite Pikmin joined the roster. And speaking of rosters, behemoth Super Smash Bros. Melee also joined the fray. And then we have the Nintendo 64, Nintendo's first proper foray into the third dimension, with Super Mario 64 suitably leading the charge, and Wave Race 64 and Pilot Wings 64 along for the ride. While it would go on to give us Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye, and other all-time classics, Super Mario 64 has to go down as one of the most iconic launch games of its generation. Not only was it the best-selling title of its day, it did a lot for establishing the controls for 3D games. Even more impressive when you consider just how odd the N64 gamepad looks even now. Right, let's briefly look at Nintendo's handheld offerings too, starting with the 3DS, one of Nintendo's most infamous debuts. March 2011 was a difficult time for Nintendo. The 3DS launch was basically a disaster. 3 versions of Nintendogs plus Cats and Pilot Wings Resort were the first-party offerings, neither particularly strong. The title most often considered the first major first-party release for the 3DS, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D, didn't release until mid-June, and the third-party offerings at launch, Super Street Fighter 4, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Shadow Wars, and Ridge Racer 3D weren't enough to justify the then extremely high price point. By quarter 2 of 2011, Nintendo slashed the console's price by nearly a third, and offered early, full-price adopters recompense in the form of the Ambassador Program, a collection of exclusive ports including the only way to play select GBA titles ever to be released on the console. The 3DS and its many iterations did bounce back as its life cycle went on, but that launch, oof. And for the last launch we'll look at, we have the Nintendo DS, which launched with Super Mario 64 DS, continuing the original game's trailblazing, this time mainstream gaming's first venture into 3D gaming on the go. Similarly to other Nintendo consoles, the DS had a staggered rollout globally, coming to the US first on November 21st, 2004, before hitting Japan December 2nd, Australia on February 24th the following year, and finally Europe on March 11th. One day off Mario Day. We were this close to greatness. With its ability to run both DS and Game Boy Advance cartridges, the launch of the DS was as much about having new hardware for existing games as it was about getting new titles, which made for a different kind of release. You could argue the 3DS was the same, but public opinion had seemingly shifted by then. Okay, so what does this all mean for the Switch 2? Well, laying out Nintendo's recent console release history, some pretty clear patterns do emerge. For starters, I think we'll see a major hard-hitting first-party release of a well-established series, one of Nintendo's flagship franchises. History shows Nintendo need to come out swinging in the first-party department, one haymaker to carry all the weight, as console releases lacking here ultimately suffer one way or another. The biggest hint as to what this title may be is the inclusion of a new Mario Kart in the console's unveiling. Considering Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is still the best-selling game of the original Switch's lineup, it would be certainly enough of a pull to get consoles flying off the shelves. It's also worth considering that twice now we've seen the game act as both a launch title for a new console and a swan song for its predecessor, with both times being very successful. They've both been Zelda titles, so make of that what you will, but if we were to pull on that thread, we do know of at least a couple of games in development that are slated for this year and have been thus far flagged for the original Switch. Backwards compatibility could be considered here, as it's been confirmed the Switch 2 will play most Switch games, but I don't think that would stop a simultaneous release. For example, the Wii had GameCube backwards compatibility, so you could have bought the GameCube version of Twilight Princess and played it on your brand new Wii if you were that determined to avoid motion controls. Although having said that, the shift in hardware was a clear factor there. Will the Switch 2 offer a similar leap? We will definitely also see a, say it with me now, demonstrative collection of minigames that utilize the console's various new functionalities. A support release, if you will. One that'll bolster the sales of the console to those unfamiliar with the first-party juggernaut. Finally, don't forget a slew of third-party launch titles that reflect the gaming landscape as a whole. Where the Wii U and GameCube focused on bringing in mainstream titles to apply to the core gamer, and the Switch focused on indie giants, it'll be interesting to see what approach the Switch 2 wants to adopt for its initial third-party support. So, what are your predictions for the Switch 2's release lineup? And what, if anything, do you think Nintendo's console launch history could lead us to expect? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next time on Switch On.